Lingerie with interesting details, with bold and sexy designs that are made to fit a wide range of body types and a relatively affordable price. Is that an oxymoron? Is that the holy grail? Well, it turns out that there are some brands that are trying to do exactly that, and one of them is the brand that we are going to be talking about today. Thistle Spire is a brand founded in Brooklyn in 2015 by Maggie Bacon, and they are relatively a small team still. According to their website, they are only 8 people. And another slightly unusual thing that we see on their website is that they say that they are self-funded, so they don't rely on any external investors. And this seems like a random thing to say on a brand website, but this means that they are able to take more risky decisions when it comes to design and when it comes to how the brand presents itself, because they are not subject to whatever the investors want, which usually is profit and not necessarily pushing the barriers in the lingerie industry. So Thistle and Spire have a very clear commitment to inclusivity and diversity, and they show that in the images that they show on their website and on their social media. They have a wide range of models of different body types, of different skin tones, and even of different ages. And they also say in the website that they back that commitment with quarterly donations to several charities like the Trevor Project or the Kinsey Institute. I feel like a brand that states their values in such a clear way, it's very refreshing, because we are always told not to mix politics and business, but actually whenever we make a purchase, we are implicitly supporting some values or choosing not to support others. So in this case, they are very upfront with what they stand for. And another thing that I liked about them is that when I was looking at their website, they have a very detailed page talking about their design process. And looking at that page, we can see that they, for example, they create the embroideries. The embroideries are custom made for them. So that means that they are unique to this brand. And they have, we will see that a bit later, but they have very unusual embroidery designs, which I believe is one of the major strengths of this brand. And also we see on this page that they implement 3D tools in their development. And on this image, we can see from the screenshot that they are using Browseware. And we are going to actually be doing something similar later in Clo, because we are going to be taking one of the most iconic designs of this brand, and we are going to analyze or trying to recreate the pattern making using Clo. But that will be a little bit later. For now, we are going to take a closer look at those designs that are currently on Thistle and Spire website, so that we can get a clearer idea of what is their ethos as a brand. So I'm going to start with the bodysuits, because they have some interesting designs. For example, one that catches my eye is this one. And one of the things that I like the most about Thistle and Spire is that they always, or at least almost always, they try to show the styles in both one of the core sizes and one of the larger sizes. And this is super important, because sometimes, even when you grade a style very carefully, you will see some small differences. Especially what stands out to me the most is this central part, that on the bigger size it looks a little bit empty around the sides. I personally would have probably brought this lace part a little bit up so that it covers that empty space, but that's like a personal preference. But at least it's really good that they are showing that difference, because when you are going to buy this garment, you know what to expect. And this is another one of the bodysuits that I wanted to show you, because I think it's so original. So if we take a closer look, it has an embroidery applique, and I like it because it kind of tells a story and it involves the wearer into that story. So we have here this, I think it's Cupid with the bow and arrow, and here I think there is like a bow, and here it's a rose. And my favorite part is that some parts of the embroidery of the applique spill out into the body of the wearer. So especially we can see that with these chains here. And I think of this as in the same way when a movie or a TV series, we say that it breaks the fourth wall, that it incorporates the viewer into the story. So in that same way, this bodysuit seems to incorporate the wearer into that story. It's creating kind of like a whole artwork in the body of the wearer, and it's incorporating the curves of whoever is wearing it into that artwork. It's part of its physicality, it's part of its sculptural reality. So I really like it. I think it's super original. And another bodysuit that I wanted to show you is this one, because when I was researching this brand for the video, I discovered a very interesting story about this design. On the Instagram page of the founder, she shares a bit of background about this piece, and apparently they used to have another bodysuit, another playsuit that was kind of similar, but that it was getting very bad reviews from people that were above a size medium. They were saying that the cups weren't supportive enough and that the whole design didn't look great on bigger body types. So the brand decided to completely redesign that style, and they came up with this one, which still retains that sexiness, that playfulness of the original one, but has more supportive elements. And I think it's great when a brand can incorporate that customer feedback, that it shows that they are really listening to its customers and adapting their product to fit their needs. If we go back to the page that shows all of the styles, we can see that there are a lot of styles that feature some of that custom embroidery that we talked about earlier. And they have also some lace, or at least maybe this is embroidery too, but it's not the same kind of embroidery that we see on other sets. And this is also lace. So for me, these kind of lace sets, they are very beautiful, don't get me wrong, like this is amazing. But for me, the lace sets are like generic, pretty lingerie. Like they could have been made by a number of brands. Like this could probably be Bordel, for example. So maybe if it was Bordel, we had to add a couple of zeros to this price. But for me, these are okay. But the styles in which the voice of this brand can really be heard, for me, are the ones that feature their signature custom-made embroidery. So some examples of that are this bralette. The shape of this bralette is super unique. I love that stitching there that is kind of vintage. I love the V-wire at the neckline, and above all else, I love the placement of that embroidery. I think that playing with the placement of the embroideries is one of the things that Thistle Spire does the best. And we can see other examples like these Dracona bodies, and I think this is amazing. Like, I mean, there are dragons. This is peak lingerie. So this is super fun, and look at how they have placed the embroidery here. So they have made it as if the tail of the dragon continues from the cap to the bodies. So that shows a level of attention to detail that is very hard to find, especially at this price point. This is one of my favorite sets of this brand, and here we can see that it not only comes in several colors, but also the mesh comes in several skin tones. And finally, another example that I have is the Tigris bra, or the Tigris set. And again, they are showing a lot of care by placing the main motif of the embroidery in the best place possible for this set. And also it's full of small details like this hardware there. It's super unique, and this is why I think that these embroidered styles are where the brand really shines, are the ones that are uniquely Thistle Spire. And talking about things that are unique to Thistle Spire, let's take a look at their probably most iconic collection, the one that went viral several years ago, and it was actually the one that made me discover this brand, and that is the Medusa collection. So these are all the garments from the Medusa range. It's quite extensive. They have nightwear even, but for me the most striking pieces are this set, the bralette and the brief, and of course the bodysuit. So let's open them and let's analyze them a little bit closer. So this Medusa bodysuit and the Medusa bralette, the panties, lingerie, and I think there was also an underwire bra and several other garments. Those are the most iconic for me from Thistle and Spire. And the most striking thing about these designs is, of course, the placement of the embroidery. And you know that I like my lingerie with a story, so Medusa was a character from the Greek mythology. She was, depending on who you ask, she was a hideous monster or a beautiful maiden, but her hair was made of snakes. And if you looked at them, or rather if she looked at you, you were turned into stone. And this kind of ties up with what we talk about in the Studio Pia video about the male gaze, because in this case we also have kind of a commentary of that. I'm not sure if it's intentional or not, but the fact that the gaze of Medusa would turn whoever it was looking at into stone, it's an interesting take when we are talking about a lingerie set that traditionally is considered as something to be seen. And of course the fact that this embroidery has to be very carefully placed on the cups, on the band of this bralette, and also on the panty, it means that it must waste quite a lot of fabric, and that especially if this embroidery is custom made, it's probably quite expensive to create. But still, the price of this bra, the original price when it's not on sale, it's apparently $64, which is not bad actually. It's relatively affordable. So how did they manage to get this affordable price? I think they have cut some corners. If we make this a little bit bigger, we can see that all the neckline, for example, and this part here, the armhole, this leg line, side of the panty, all of that is finished with fold over elastic, which is probably the cheapest way, or one of the cheapest ways to finish an edge in lingerie. It's an elastic that just folds over like a bias tape, and you can apply that in one action. So usually with regular elastic, you stitch it to the outside and then turn it around and stitch it to the inside. So those are two operations, and that means that it takes a little bit longer. So with this kind of elastic, you only have to do one operation, so it's faster, and also the elastic itself tends to be a little bit cheaper. So that's one way that they had to reduce that price, or like to make this a bit more affordable than what it would have been if it was finished, for example, with silk bias binding or with a regular lingerie elastic. And then there's this panel here. I think that if we open the brief, we will see the composition of that central part, but apparently not. It's not included, but it would probably be some kind of polyester blend, some kind of polyester and elastane, or maybe nylon and elastane. So this is not the kind of materials and the kind of construction that we saw in the Studio Pia video, but obviously this is considerably cheaper than Studio Pia pieces. So this is also something to take into account, like you get what you pay for, and sometimes this kind of a lower price point, it may be what you're looking for. I'm not saying that these garments are badly made, I'm just saying that the way that they are made has to be in line with their price. If they were finished with the most exquisite couture techniques, we would have to add several zeros to that price. So this is a very different segment of the market than what Studio Pia was targeting, for example, or like brands like Bordel are targeting. Even though the designs are kind of edgy and strappy and all that, they move in different spheres in the lingerie industry. And it comes in a very extensive size chart, like no brand is going to fit 100% of the population, but at least Thistle and Spire are trying. And if I had to add a little bit of criticism to this set, to the design of this set, is that in the front is absolutely striking with the embroidery and all those details, but in the back, for me, it looks a little bit plain. And I think that part of that is that the embroidery is not stretchy, or at least it's not not stretchy enough. We saw in the fabric composition that it's 100% nylon. It doesn't have lycra, it doesn't have spandex, while the mesh is nylon and spandex. So the mesh is this part here and this part there that allow the garment to be a little bit more adaptable. But for me, I would have liked to see some more of that embroidery here or maybe here, like to the side or something. But also the specific placement that it requires means that it's wasting more fabric. So if we use it at the back, it would also increase the fabric usage and the fabric cost of the garment. So the price would have to go up. However, what is kind of bothering me the most about this, actually it's not that easily seen on this picture, but I have collected other pictures from their Instagram and other parts of their website, and what I don't like is this finish. So in this case we cannot see it as plainly, but in other colors, especially when the person is a little bit darker than the mesh that they are using, we can see that it has a bonded edge, which is great if you are concerned about panty lines, but I don't love the way that it looks. So personally, I would have preferred either continue with that fold over elastic that they are using at the front, even though that would mean that the panty line may be visible under tight clothing. But if you really don't want panty lines, like I personally couldn't care less, but if you really don't want to see them, maybe they could have cut this piece double. And I think that's what I'm going to do when we go into Clo and we try to recreate this pattern making. I think that I personally would have preferred this to have an edge that blends in a nicer way with the skin. So to have a clearer idea of what we are going to be recreating is going to be this long line bralette and this high waist panty. It's quite high cut aside from being high waist, and the bralette, it has a gathered cap instead of darts, and it's made that way because they don't want to distort the beautiful embroidery. So the volume is gathered at the underband, and then we have this nice cut out that I think it has some kind of plastic bone in there to add some structure, we will see. And it closes with this, I think they are magnetic closures at the front, so that's a super nice detail. And the panty, aside from that cutout at the back and the adjustability at the waist, it's pretty basic. So that is what we are going to do now in Clo. So I have created a panty base and a bralette to fit this avatar. This is an avatar that I have made in Clo3D, and that's why she doesn't have any hair, because I don't have any hair in Dash. And I made this avatar in Dash because the avatars that are not a core size in Clo are pretty terrible, and it's quite hard to modify an avatar in Clo and increase the size without it looking absolutely crazy. So I went to Dash and created one. It's a bit larger than what is considered core size in the industry, and I'm doing a lot of air quotes when I say this because core size and standard sizes are a bunch of bullshit. Like, nobody has a standard body, standard doesn't exist. But let's see how we can recreate that set from Thistle Spire. Let's start by raising this part maybe around there. So now I'm going to make the other side matte. And I think I'm going to lower the waist slightly because I'm going to add that waistband later. And now I'm going to create the waistband. So I'm going to add these two parts of the waistband, and I'm going to create a rectangle with that measurement. Let's attach it and see how it looks. So now I'm going to increase this a little bit more, and probably I'm going to lower the waistline all around, and especially in the back, because now I think the back is a little bit higher than the front. So more or less like this. And now I'm going to draw this seam, and now let's add the seam at the back. And I'm going to remove all of this. And now here I'm going to add a little bit of a curve so that it kind of like hugs the body better. And the idea is that this is supposed to be unfolded along this seam. And the other thing that I'm going to do is to mark the keyhole opening at the back. And I'm also going to add elastic here, but just to keep this from stretching. And at the front, I'm just going to cut these lines. And now that we have our panty pattern more or less ready, let's take a look at the bra. First, I'm going to mark more or less where I want the opening in the back to be. So I think I'm going to mark a line around where the straps are attached, and I'm merging these two pieces. And now I'm going to change the sewing of the straps so they are crossed at the back. And let's give them a little bit more length because now that they are crossed, they have to cover more space. And now let's see the front. So I'm going to create an internal line here of around 1 centimeter. And now I'm going to increase that maybe like 2.5, something like that. And I think that I'm going to bring the panty down slightly so that we can enlarge this part a little bit more. And now let's cut this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure around this because this part of the body is obviously smaller than the underbust. And to that measurement, I'm going to remove the 10% stretch reduction. And now I'm going to subtract it from this measurement. And that gives me around 2.2 centimeters. So I'm going to remove this excess from here. And this part is not going to be made of elastic. It's going to be made of the same embroidery as the cups. So I'm going to start applying the correct fabrics to the different parts of the bra and the panty so that we can better assess the fit. Okay, so now I have applied some of the correct fabrics. And now I'm noticing that in the original version, this part, this center part, is a bit narrower. So I'm going to change that now. And this is why it's so important to pay attention to the different fabrics when we are drafting, because how those fabrics behave, they are going to alter how our garment looks and works. So now let's take a look at this band. I'm going to create that other elastic at the bottom because I think it's going to help give it the shape that it's intended to have. And I'm going to draw that cutout at the front, and I'm going to split this part and also the elastic. And now let's look at the caps. The bra actually it's like a triangle cap, so it doesn't have a back band, so I'm going to remove that from my pattern. Okay, so now I have the base shape of this cap and I'm going to bring it around here probably. So I'm going to measure that length around 15 centimeters-ish. So I'm going to bring this up. And now let's fix this small issue. And for that, I'm going to use the slash and spread tool. And now I'm going to add the gathers. So if we look at the example, the gathers seem to be more or less placed at the center of the cap. So let's place a knot to indicate that. And let's indicate to Clo that this should be gathered. So let's simulate. And if necessary, we can adjust that gather placement. Okay, so that's more or less what I was looking for. And now I'm going to add the back straps. And probably I need to rearrange the panty because it's been going up slowly as we were working. And now I'm going to add all of those details and we'll come back when it's time to place the embroidery. And this is what I meant when I talked about having this piece unfolded along the straight edge to avoid any visible panty lines. And that means that we don't have any seams and we don't have the need to finish that seam with a bonding that, as we saw before, it looks kind of weird, or we don't have the need to use fold over elastic or anything like that. And the only drawback is probably that it wastes more fabric. And right now I'm not going to continue with this piece in the simulation because it's making the simulation a little bit unstable in Clo. So I'm going to cut the piece and I'm going to just pretend that it's unfolded. But I just wanted to show you that this is the construction that I would prefer for this set. Okay, so now I'm going to place the embroidery, and instead of using an embroidery fabric, I'm going to just place the embroidery as a graphic, because obviously the original garment is made with a fabric that is already embroidered and very carefully cut so that the shape of the embroidery matches the placement that we want to achieve with the pattern. But for me, it's easier to just place the embroidery where I want it. So I'm going to bring my graphic and I'm going to play around with the placement until I'm happy. And now the problem is that if we look at our embroidery, it doesn't look like an embroidery at all. Like, it looks like some kind of a print. So if we want to fake the look of an embroidery, first the best way would be to actually scan a fabric that is embroidered instead of trying to fake it. The second best way would be to bring this image, this graphic, into Photoshop and apply some kind of filter. Photoshop now has an embroidery filter, and there are also other ways to kind of fake the embroidery look. But if we don't want to do that, we can just apply a normal map to our graphic, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose a normal map that has quite a lot of texture, like this cotton canvas, and I'm going to apply it to my embroidery, and then I'm going to increase the intensity of the normal map to something a little bit crazy. And now if we go to the render, we see that now our embroidery has a little bit of texture, and maybe it's easier to see if I desaturate it, but now we can see that it looks a bit more realistic. Obviously, if I wanted to create a very high quality render, I would have to go to Photoshop and probably do something a little bit more elegant. But for what we want to achieve now, I think that this is enough. So I'm also going to apply the embroidery here. And now I'm going to place it on the panties. So now I'm going to finish adding the rest of the details, like the neckline elastic and all the hardware, and I'll come back when I have finished. And by the way, if you happen to be interested in this pattern making part of the video, I have just updated my pattern making course in Clo3D. So in that course, you will learn how to do pretty much what I'm doing right now. You will learn how to draft a bralette and a panty pattern from scratch, and then you will learn to modify it to create different designs. So if that's interesting for you, check out the link that I have on the description of the video, and I have also included a discount code to celebrate the launch, or rather the relaunch of this course. It will be active for a week, so if you happen to be watching this more or less the day that it's been published, you can get the course with a discount. The code is also on the description of the video. And now let's go back to pattern making. Okay, so this is my final design. I have added the embroidery to the back too because otherwise I felt that it was a little bit too empty, but the rest is more or less the same as the original. Obviously the embroidery is not the same, but I have tried my best to do something similar, and I have also created a couple more colorways. Oh, and another one of the changes that I made from the original was that I made the mesh at the back, instead of being a kind of like flesh colored, I gave them the general color of the rest of the set, because if I make it nude, I think it looks a bit plain. Like maybe in this way it blends better with the rest of the set. Personally, like this is just my opinion. You can tell me what you think in the comments. So I hope this was interesting. I hope you have learned more about this brand, and I personally, I'm very curious to see where they go next. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know which one was your favorite design. And of course, if you're interested in my pattern making course, don't forget to check out the link in the description and also the discount code. Have a lovely rest of your day and see you soon in the next video.